I like to do this class around this time of year because it's the time where everybody's like, oh, what are your fears, and also the veil is thinning. Part everybody comes together to say it means that things that are mainly unseen consciously can become consciously, seen. Well, things that you usually see when you're only sleeping, you might see while you're just walking around, which is kind of scary for a lot of people. And there was a time in my life, 30 years plus, where I was attacked by spirits endlessly. The information I'm sharing with you comes from the consistent symptomatic patterns and remedials that came with that experience. I used to always have psychic attacks. A psychic attack it's different than a nightmare. A nightmare takes place in the mental sphere. So it's like a fear that you're dealing with. It can also take place on the astral sphere as well, the emotional dream space. But a psychic attack means that it went through those realms and is actually attacking your body. It's attacking your etheric body. Instead of just being kind of in these realms, I would get attacked here, and so it would cause me sometimes pain, like physical pain, and sometimes would really zap my chi level. No one knew what was happening to me at the time. I didn't hear the term psychic attack till I was much older, but this stuff got gradually worse. I started out, me and my sister were both very sensitive as children. We'd say, oh, did you see that? Oh, I saw that. That's crazy. Oh my God. But no one else was in that realm. People thought, oh my God, those are the demon twins or whatever. But we're just like, oh, so we'd be up all night, especially certain times a year. And the fall was actually one of those times that we'd be looking in the wood and we'd start seeing shapes, things start moving, you see eyes popping out, you hear messages. And she would oftentimes get pulled out of her body a lot and be shown like stuff that she didn't understand as a kid. Neither one of us did, but it was like pyramids and tombs and things like that. And so she would try to draw these pictures. They were very cartoony, but it'd be like pharaohs and stuff. And or with bleeding tears and things, and people are like, you're just weird, That was happening, and it got worse around puberty, so it started getting higher. She was able somehow around the age 15 to 14 to turn hers off, and I didn't know how to. I very much wanted to. I'm like, sister, what'd you do? How did you turn? Because things were getting worse. It wasn't declining like it was for her to where she was able to pull some switch. And to this day, she's like, I'm not really sure how I did it. I prayed really hard that I wouldn't have it and did these things, but I'm like, well, I couldn't do it. So I got up to my college years, and that's when it got super worse. Just when I thought I was already sensitive, now a whole nother realm started coming through that now I call the shadow realm. So going back to the symptoms of what I was experiencing, the beings that caused them, I said, spawned from the dimension that I call the shadow realm. There were always pre-symptoms that I would exhibit before a full-out attack. And one thing I did learn is that a lot of people experience the pre-symptoms, but they don't have the sensitivity to experience the full-out attack. So some people say, oh, I feel off today, or they'll be extra emotional, or they'll have a headache for some unknown reason that's not health related. I would have some of those symptoms, except it would get all the way to the point to where I was literally being attacked, because there's a certain type of constitutional aura that is easier accessed by them, to that degree. A normal, healthy human being, does not have these issues. Some people say, oh, it's kind of like a gift, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, it can be definitely a huge weakness, because someone who doesn't have those sensitivities can sleep anywhere. They can work anywhere, Whereas for me, it was very picky on who I could be around, where I could sleep, where I could work, things like that, because I'd pick up on this stuff. I was sensitive to where it's hitting me directly, Most of us have protections that are like, okay, to stay here, or to stay here. I just have a little nightmare, or, or something like that. Another pre-symptom is I'd feel like I was being watched, It's like, man, so I'd lay down like this guy, I'm like, and it would get stronger when the lights went out, of course. As soon as the lights go out, it's like, you're like, what? You look, nothing's there, And so insomnia was a huge issue, because there's a blockage that happens where it's almost like your body has a defense mechanism that's saying, don't go to sleep, and you're like, I need to go to sleep. I have school in the morning. I have to go to work, It's a battle. Yeah. So, but if you do fall asleep, it's worse because you open up way more. And so the difference between a nightmare and a psychic attack, one of them is that in the nightmare, you might see something scary and run from it. But another thing about the psychic attack is it doesn't even have to be something scary in the dream. You could just be walking by and see a little bunny rabbit. And you look in the bunny rabbit's eyes and all of a sudden something jumps out of the eyes and you're just like, ah! And I remember the first time I had a terrible one, I was probably about 19 or 20. And I'm freaking out. It felt like, because what happens with my sensitivity, it's not like I just get pulled there, but I bring it back. So I can still feel it crawling all over my skin. I feel it, I'm screaming like someone's killing me, right? And so at the time I was living with roommates, these guys. And one of them's like, what's going on? And I'm trying to act normal, it's okay, guys. And then one of my friends is just like, he's messing with those demons. And it's like, just shakes his head. He needs to leave those demons alone. The other one had a gun. But that's kind of how that went down, being forced to sleep with the light on. Because with the light on, it dissipates that, it doesn't have the same power. It's a shadow being, so so in the shadows, it can expand and fully express itself. And if you have an affinity for the shadow realm, you're more susceptible to beings that reside there. I really enjoy this picture here because that's a very, very good depiction of some of the things I've kind of seen. I don't know who this artist was, but whoever they were, they knew somebody or something. It's really weird stuff that you see in there. So it says, most people around me have no idea what was happening, but sometimes they hear me scream or go into seizure-like motions as I try to fight them off. Talk to my ex-wife, she had to go through a lot of that stuff. Like, what are you doing? As I attempted to fight the shadow spirit off of me, they were very attracted to me because of my sensitivity to them. That's the other thing about awareness. And that's why people are like, watch out what you get into, because if they can see you, see them. It's like, oh, what's up? It creates a magnetism, almost like when you run into someone who has similar interests or someone who has a similar vibe. Oh, you're into sports, I'm into sports too. It just draws, like attracts like, and the same thing in the spiritual. But yeah, I've seen certain things that look like almost like they're coming through a veil to look, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And things that look very much like weird stuff. This one was just cool because it was freaky, but I've never seen anything that looked like that. So we're going to look into sort of like the layers of the body. Keep in mind that we are made of many bodies and carry degrees of potential strength and weight in each one based on factors ranging from DNA to planetary stuff. Stronger the body, the stronger the sense. So one thing I've found by just working with many people is that we'll have maybe almost imagine like a black dot here and a black dot there and a black dot here. And those would be places where we're sensitive. But people aren't sensitive in all of them at the same time. So someone who's telepathic may not feel emotional bodies very well. Different people have these different complex configurations. But what I found with most folks I've run into can pretty much feel the average individual that's not hit with all this other stuff directly kind of reside here in the mental sphere, empathic sphere, and the physical sphere, and the rest is for all the weirdos. All beings and realms have two aspects, a natural, obvious body emanation or appearance. So just knowing, like, for example, if I talk to you or I talk to you, you might say something that you don't mean because you have a hidden nature as well. So we assume that, because we can see the spirit, that we know its intentions as well. Or because it emanates this thing that, it must be fully that thing. And that's one thing I found isn't always the case. They can have ulterior motives just as much as we can. Well, people ask me, well, how do you know if a spirit's good or bad? And one of the best judges is patterns. How do you feel after you deal with this spirit? Do you always feel drained? Do you always feel bad? Do you have terrible luck right afterwards? Like patterns, just like getting to know any person. It's not because this person just he emitted this great light. It's like, no, wait, what happened after that? Because there's very much deceivers in all realms. Which sometimes we can forget because the Disney Hollywood, like, oh no, I'm your guardian angel. It's like, wait, hold on, like, who are you though? And the stereotype that everything in the dark is evil. Because there's beautiful beings in the shadow realm as well that I've got to know by being in there. So just making sure that you understand that, and that because sometimes what we'll say in the physical, in our emotional body and our mental body, we don't really mean. Same thing with a being that lives solely here, can use something here. and you can keep bouncing back to hide your intention, depending on where that being lives. That what is truly good must show patterns of goodness and also be reflected in multiple dimensions as good and pleasurable and effective to be truly good in a holistic sense. Pleasure is a very important thing to pay attention to, because when we have fragmented pleasure, it could be very damaging. But if you have pleasure in multiple spheres, it's usually a sign of wholeness or goodness. So for example, if you just eat lollipops every day, your tongue is like, yeah, this is great. But the rest of your body is like, I'm not getting what I need. But say you're eating cherries, you're feeding multiple spheres. You're not just pleasuring the tongue, you're pleasuring the body, you're pleasuring the mind, and you're pleasuring so many other different spheres that it becomes more of a holistic pleasure, which is a very good sign of goodness, Whereas when it's fragmented, you might get pain somewhere because it's saying, hey, you need to alter something. There needs to be pain so that you can alter this. So there can be pleasure here as well. The physical body that correlates to organ systems and structure. You got the energetic or etheric body, which is a mirror of the physical body. There's a very famous physician, you probably heard of him, named Paracelsus. Have you heard of him? Yeah. Paracelsus is a very cool guy to study. But he would always show images of like the etheric body and show like how, in his description, he'd talk about how it was just as physical as our physical body, but just like in another dimension, So you kind of have to make sure you're taking care of both. The astral, also known as the emotional body, is a repository for your feelings, along with many other things. We'll go into that. You have your mental body, which is involved with thought process and intelligence. And the interesting thing about this is in our Western world, we tend to think all these things are like chemicals and things in the body. But from more of a shamanic understanding, it's more of like radio signals, And so it's just like, so some radio signals have an affinity for this area. Some signals have an affinity for your gut. So like, listen with your gut. You got waves and stuff going here. You got waves going here. The ethereal plane is also pretty amazing if you develop it. When I used to take Shaolin Kung Fu, I had a teacher who had developed his chi so well that even after his muscles began to fail and he got real old and brittle, if you touched him, he still felt like iron. He could still break things and stuff like that because his chi was so strong. Chi can get to the point to where it's like almost like a secondary ethereal muscle, which is very odd. I just always bring that up because he looks so flabby and out of shape, but he could just like do anything. You're just like, how are you doing this? And it's also the ethereal realm, which is between the astral and the physical, is also a transport between the astral and the physical. The astral is a very desirable realm. It resonates sort of with like the sacral chakra. But one thing I've found spiritually, it's really almost like a ground zero for all the realms to mingle. So when you're in the astral realm, which is like the sleep, dream space, when you're there, it's a place where no matter what your sensitivity is, you can meet some really high up spirits if they want to come talk to you. That's why it's really cool to like develop that astral body too, because even if you're like, I'm not the most, when you go to sleep, you're open to that realm. And it's like the original internet. That's the way I look at it, because no matter where you're at, you can get in contact with someone that wants to get in contact with you. But the astral or emotional body is a well-developed body that processes the emotions and all the forces of the astral plane / emotions. This realm is opposite of the mental realm in that it says, what if? So this is the realm of endless possibilities, like anything's possible, as opposed to the mental realm that tends to want to control it. There's like fixed realms and very mutable realms. And this is a very mutable realm, which is why so many of these different spheres can mingle there. It's not hard. It's not a very hard. That's why dreams tend to be more watery. And, I was in this situation, and then I was in this situation, and I'm in that situation, Whereas when you leave the astral realm, if you project out of your body and you leave the astral realm, you're going to be in somewhere with rules. That's one of the key ways to know that you've left the astral plane. When you're dreaming, your astral body is floating in the astral plane. But if you astral project using your astral body out of that realm where you're usually just sleeping, it won't be watery. It won't be changey. The rest of the realms are pretty solid. So there'll be rules. There's like gravity types. You have to learn how to use this body. If you learn how to use another mind in order to get around. It's a very trippy experience that I've had a few times. So what happens is what most people do, which is most comfortable, is just to kind of sit back and stare at the projection screen pretty much. You sit back, you look at the projection screen, which is just spewing out all your emotional stuff, all these symbols, all these things you can look at. But you can get to a certain degree where you don't have to, that's not the only option. You can consciously say, I'm in the astral realm. I don't have to I don't have to go on the ride. I can consciously start looking around and doing other things, you know what I mean? And that's a very active type of dreaming, but that's you exploring the astral plane. With me, I've never astral projected just on purpose. I felt like I was always chosen. Because the ethereal body and the physical body are very heavy. And so I would feel sort of like this portal come above, and then it would kind of grace me with I call it the invitation, but it was almost like this magnetic sort of energy that was like, now I can take the leap. It would allow me to jump consciously, while I'm just conscious, right out into that space. And then I would land somewhere fully conscious. I've always felt like I've been chosen and just taken places. But then I was left there. It's like, now figure it out. Yeah. And then it's hard because you get up and you fall down. You get up and you fall down and you look and there's it's like a see-through hand and you see shadows moving in the distance and stuff like that all around. And it's really odd. You can hear things. It's just really odd. And so when I came back, I would not be like groggy or anything. When you wake up, you're like, oh, all right, let's get it. It's not like that. It's way different. Because when you're sleeping, you're in a relaxed state. And in that relaxed state, your body, your astral body is going to the astral realm because that's really ground zero. Like that's really where the energy is. There's tons of energy there. That's why all the spirits want to feed off of us and stuff. You know what I mean? Because that's like where all the fruit is. You know what I mean? There's so much good astral emotional juice there. Well, astral body is what you use basically every time you go to sleep. Every time you go to sleep, you disconnect and go to the astral realm. And the lucid dreaming is so basically it's almost like saying, hey, like, let's say you're in a dream where you're running from a lobster for some weird reason. You're like, the lobster. Yeah, I'm sorry, I tried to cook you. Then you say, wait a minute. I'm in the astral realm. And once you start consciously dreaming and saying, get out of the way, lobster, I'm going to try to fly like Sharona. Once you do that, then you're in a lucid dream. Because you're not a slave. You get to make decisions. You're not just sitting back, relaxing, soaking up the fruit that you need to bring back to your waking body. So, but people that have a high affinity for this realm, that are very strong here, they tend to be super empathic. These are people that pick up emotions. Like the most extreme folks that experience this realm consciously are people they don't want to go out. They don't want to go out. They don't want to be around large groups. It's just too much emotional stimulation, And people that are depleted here will become psychic vampires in a lot of different ways typically. If they're like, I don't have any emotional energy, let me suck off of yours and yours. And then you're like, Then they're like, yeah, I'm back. And there's so many different ways of doing this. And it's really interesting. There was a cool book about it called The Celestine Prophecy. I don't know if everybody's read that, but like they go into that, the different ways that we suck emotional energy off of people and play that power game. And they're not paying any attention. They're not looking at you, look at your watch. You're like, you're yawning, and they just keep going blah, 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 because they need it. They need more and more. Yeah, no social cues for them. But remember, this is the realm of fruit. This is what the beings, especially the astral leeches and things, they want to suck off of you. That can cause some draining things. Mental sphere, which is sort of like how the liver operates in our body. The liver's like, let's organize this stuff, these nutrients and get everything nice and straight. That's what this energy is kind of doing. It's a very egoic realm. It's like the heart of the ego. It's like, this is real, this isn't. That could never happen. This is reality. Jesus is the only way. No, science is the only way. It says, it finds a belief system and goes very linear off of whatever that is. It's just the nature of it to try to balance out the impossible, everything's possible of the astral plane, because that realm's just like, it's like a hungry child. It's like the inner child in a way. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's possible. Oh, yeah, I can love her too and love this person, even though this person's like abusive. It sets rules. It's rules, boundaries. It's hard. It's fixed. You know, and people, depending on your personality, it'll be a little looser. You know, but everybody still has an outlook. You know, it's like, this is how I live. This is what I am. You know, and this is how I move. And some people are very exceptional in this realm. Like you'll see they have amazing mental power. They might even have power if they're really good here. They have power like the mind over matter sort of power where they're like, I feel the pain. I don't feel it anymore just because I said so. But the problem is that they think everybody can do that. You know, like they're like, I did it with my mind. I got rid of my cold with my mind. You can too. And they don't realize it's just a special gift that they have. I call them mentalists. They're very strong with their mind power, and they're very good at self-control, sometimes too good where they miss out on surprises. They don't like surprises, you know what I mean? But they're very good at controlling. And so the mind over matter movement is due to a high respect for what this visual sphere has to give. The strongest defense of this sphere is against imaginary threats in the mind. That's another thing to pay attention to, is we grow up with, this is real, this isn't. That's just a fantasy. The truth is that anything in your mind's eye is real there. You know what I mean? So if you're thinking about your fear exists there. If the boogeyman's in your mental sphere, that's where he exists. And sometimes you can fight what's in the mental sphere by just simply fighting it back with your imagination. Yeah. That's where you get all this like, oh, just imagine a white light coming in and shoot it at the guy. You know what I mean? You get all that because visualization does work in that realm. It's a very visual, it's a visual sphere. The mental sphere is very visual. What you see is what gets put in here. The shows you watch are getting put in there, and it has to digest. It's a stomach. You know, it has to digest all that stuff and process it before it goes to other places. It's bigger than the brain, but it has an affinity for the brain. It likes the brain, but it exists without the brain. And when you go to higher dimensions, you can't use your brain, which really will throw you off. That's one of the ways you'll know you're messing with some higher dimensions, is that you're like, man, I really can't move here until you learn how to think with this purely. It's different, you know. It's just bad language to say this is fake, this is real, because if it's stagnating you in any way, it's real, you know. It's just like, but how can you knock out this real mind threat? You know what I mean? So this is the realm of the power of belief, faith, and visualization work. Some folks are born with unbelievable strength here, and one thing I put here is wearing a white head wrap can sometimes calm it if you feel like it's being overactive or you're worrying too much or something like that. And just remembering that whatever's seen or heard is eaten and digested in this realm, for better or worse. So as we move up, once again, up just meaning subtle, you know. Not better or more powerful, because there's power in each sphere, you know, and that's the danger in like people like, man, forget all this root chakra stuff, bro. I'm trying to beat third eye. That's it. Only it's like, bro, you know, you gotta have a foundation. You know what I mean? You can't just like live up here just because that's where you have an affinity. You know, sometimes the things you're attracted to are actually not the things you need, you know, and that can be a hard realization. Like, you know, I wasn't into plants and stuff, you know, but I needed it, you know what I mean, to ground me, you know, because I was just floating everywhere, you know. The intuitive body. This body is a body of higher love and a doorway to peaceful existence. This is what some people would call the Ori, or the personal holy guardian angel. So the reason some people call this is because it's the dimension where much of the individual wisdom of past lives is stored. So every time you live, you know, this piece of you flies to the next life. And everything you learn there is like, it's like whispered in you, you know, and sometimes it'll come through the gut, you know, and it'll come through other areas. It's like, man, this is a great decision. It's like, why do I have a bad feeling about this? This is when you're getting beyond the mind. This is a very sensitive place that some people don't have very well developed. And then other people have very strong intuition. Some people have very weak intuition. It's a muscle that grows. But it's a great guide, the source of that bad feeling when you have your mind made up to do something that might harm you. The vision of this body is vast and can see through all dimensions except shadow. So the intuitive realm, once you develop it, it's also the realm of like psychics. When it's really strong, it has an innate ability to kind of see through these other spheres. So it's easier to tell when people are lying, or when the emotion is just false and you shouldn't give in to it, things like that, because it's at a deeper level than those. It's at a more subtle level, and it's almost like in a sense, a higher sort of place to kind of oversee those two. Can begin to see self in animals and plants in this sphere. So the interesting thing about like a lot of like esoteric thinkers and new agey type people, they think like the more spiritual you get, the more far out you get. The truth is actually the opposite. It helps you to start to see yourself in other beings. Like you can say, wow, I can see myself in you. I can see myself in you. I can see myself in this particular tree. I can see myself in the ways of this particular animal. I feel an affinity for this animal. There's also our link to where we start getting to some of the sixth senses, where we're like, wow, okay, hold on, I'm starting to feel something here, It's deeper. It's also a link to past lives, intent power, the power of intent. But it's different kind of intent power than the mind. The mind intent power is more around what's going on within you. So I'm going to intend that I do this today. This is like outer intent. Like I'm intending to connect with this tree. I'm trying to connect with this person on a deep soul level. Different kind of intent. Aliens. Like different alien type things. People seeing these grays and these different weird bobble-headed things. Sometimes people will start to have weird experiences around those things, but that can be sometimes turn into a very dark thing. And I mean dark in a bad way, it's definitely a dimension that if you feel yourself opening up to in a negative way, that you fight it, using your prayers and using other things, because it can be very damaging over time. Direct nature communication with intuitive bodies of plants, animals, and fae. Telepathy. This is also it's another very artistic sphere. Just like the astral realm is very artistic, this is another where you might start getting a lot of downloads as far as artistic expressions as well. The muse. I also call this the realm of spiritual faces, because this is the space where plants, animals, and objects and various forces can tell you what they want you to know about them. Not always what they have hidden, but what they want you to know. So you're like, I'm connecting with this tree. We kind of had a good professional conversation. It's like that. It's face value type stuff. But on this plane, you can't see through them into their intention. You only get what they want you to see. So it's like you presenting your best self. This thing is presenting what it wants you to know in this sphere. Okay, so then the next level up we have is the coincidence body, which also I call the story body. This realm manifests as the stories we live in. So that's the reason why I picked this picture, because it's like a grid, all these connections, me to Sharona, me to you, me to you. It's all part of these coincidence bodies that we're all sharing. I call it a coincidence body because oftentimes this realm manifests as what you think is a coincidence, but it's really not. It's no coincidence that we all know each other and that we're all in this room right now. And the thing is that this coincidence body, this way you're moving through your story, can be thrown off. And it's really the source of, like, when you hear about good luck versus bad luck and things like that, or everything I do is not turning out right. I walk into the kitchen, I stub my toe every time, or, what I mean? Something like that. It's like, well, why is it always rocky? And it can be that the coincidence body's been thrown off. And some people that claim to be able to do work against these spheres will try to try to do some sort of demonic thing or whatever to try to throw you off, And since a lot of people don't believe in this sphere, it's easy game. It's like, yeah, you don't know what I'm doing, but But when this dimension of self is operating at its peak, we'll experience great luck and the ability to track what we need almost immediately. When people are like, oh, I just asked the universe for this and that, blah, 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 they're usually referring to this aspect. This aspect's interesting because it's also powered by action, by your actions, the way you move in your life, for example, and the connections you make. So the more playing pieces you have, the more freedom it has to operate. So if you need a healer, for example, and but you don't know any healers, it's harder for it to bring that miracle of whatever you need into your life to balance out what you're looking for. The other thing is this sphere can be very negative if you live a life very negatively. For example, I talk to a lot of people trying to get off alcohol or cigarettes or whatever. And as soon as they make that decision, someone calls them and says, hey, I got a free cigarettes for you. I got free. And they're like, oh, well, God must want me to drink, you know what I mean? Because I tried to quit and the phone rang and the party's, you know. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. What happened is this coincidence body is geared off of your actions. It's like a spinning wheel. And if you've spun it this way for so long, the coincidences are going to pop up in a way where you're going to have that same thing pop up, you know. So if you wanted to start spinning the opposite way, you have to do different actions so that that's less likely to happen. And this is also where you share group karma, because the people that you associate with are going to share similar experiences in the long term around this coincidence body and the things that they're experiencing. And sometimes you'll see a theme in that day, which is really interesting. You're like, man, I've seen Superman 4 times today, just random places. But it's like this thing always trying to give you signs, always giving you signals. And it's really just the universe trying to balance itself out. It's an aspect that's very balancy. I think a very good term for it that the Egyptians we used to use was like ma'at. You know, that's what it kind of represents. It's the balancing force that ma'at, M-A-A-T,